Tiger fans, you're now tuned in to Tiger Rag Television, your source for the latest in LSU sports, in-depth game analysis, engaging interviews, and all things Tiger Nation. It's time to talk some LSU sports. Let's get ready for your Tiger Rag hosts, Jim Inkster, Chelsea Brumfield, Jeff Palermo, James Moran, and Tyler Nunez.
Welcome to Tiger Rag TV. I'm Chelsea Brumfield, and do we have a show for you? A big matchup happening in Death Valley this Saturday. Auburn is going head-to-head with number 2 LSU. Will Joe Burrow do it again? I surely hope so. But coming up on the show, we have a lot, including this week's Crossfire debate, which pretty interesting topic. Jim, what do we got?
Well, we've got Jim Kleinpeter, who's a featured columnist for Tiger Rag, also covers Southern University, and it's about whether LSU and Southern should play in football. Some people say yes, some people say no. I think they should play and also play at Memorial Stadium. We'll talk with Jim rather soon.
And I have to agree with you, but again, I am unbiased in my opinion, but we have that, and Dan Bornay is joining us in studio. A lot more coming up right after this break. Welcome back to Tiger Rag Television. We are in this week's Crossfire debate. It's the battle between the two Jims, Jim Inkster, president of Tiger Rag, and feature columnist Jim Kleinpeter, discussing a big topic right now, Southern football and LSU. Should they meet up in a head-to-head match? They haven't done so yet, and a lot of people think they should. Well, we're going to hear from both sides.
Glad you're with us for Tiger Rag Television. I'm Jim Inkster, the president of Tiger Rag, a magazine that's been around since 1978. And our guest at this time is a gentleman who's been covering LSU sports since the late 70s, Jim Kleinpeter. 33 years at the Times-Picayune, and now he's a featured writer for Tiger Rag, and he covers Southern University. And our Crossfire segment this week is about whether LSU should play Southern University. And Jim, the Tigers have scheduled every other team in the state except Grambling and Southern. Why not? Why hasn't LSU played Southern University?
Yeah, I think this is past due. We kind of broke through one of the milestones in the early 2000s when Skip Bertman said there's no reason for us not to play the other state schools. He did that in baseball in the 80s, and it turned out to really help baseball throughout the state. And in 2000, as athletic director, he said, we're going to keep the money in state. Let's start playing some of the state schools. Well, you got a team across town. You got an FCS team right across town, and it would be an historic day if LSU and Southern played.
Well, this year LSU played Northwestern State. Next year the Tigers face Nicholls State. It would seem it's bizarre that LSU has not played Southern. This is a university with 2 Pro Football Hall of Famers. Grambling has 4. Southern has, I think, 15 conference titles, and Grambling has even more, and they've won black football championships. It would seem long overdue. What do you think the delay is about?
Well, you know, part of it is you do things incrementally. First you start with letting in the other schools and I think LSU's not the only one like this. A lot of schools started playing in-state schools as a habit. It does a favor for your in-state schools, and you draw more people. I guarantee you, LSU will not have an empty seat in Tiger Stadium if Southern comes over. I mean, everybody in town will want to be at the game. Southern travels well. They travel almost better than they go to their home games. So I think it would be a wonderful thing for the city, which at times seems to get divided over certain things. So it just takes a while for these things to happen because of just old ways of thinking have to be, incrementally knocked down.
Well, Southern joined the SWAC in 1934. LSU joined the SEC a year before that. It's long overdue, and I think it would be a unifying aspect of our city. And Baton Rouge is the only city in the United States with 2 land-grant universities in the same city. So Southern and LSU are a big part of the fabric of this community where we are and the state as a whole. So I think you and I are in accord that LSU and Southern should play, and it looks like they may play. And you're covering the Jaguars now. It's quite a spectacle, isn't it?
Yeah, Southern, they have high expectations, and that's all you need. Dawson Odums has been very successful there, but he's just one bad loss away from being on the hot seat, just like any LSU coach. So it's very much the same. By the way, who wouldn't want to have the Southern band come in and play at halftime? So there's so many things. I think they could make like a football festival weekend out of it if they wanted to. Get the mayor involved. You could do so much with it. You could. It would be really good.
I have no doubt you're right. Now, this is where you and I disagree. I think that game should be played at Memorial Stadium, opened in 1952. As a tribute to our veterans from Korea and World War I, World War II. And we could salute our veterans. It's a neutral site. The stadium seats 21,500, could be expanded to 25,000. And Jim, as you know, in a few weeks people will be paying over $1,000. They may be paying $10,000 a ticket for the LSU-Alabama game. I think they would pay top dollar, and it would offset the fact that that's a much smaller arena than Tiger Stadium. But when we talked about this, I think you think I'm out of my tree.
And I think Southern would be over the moon for that type of deal. Although I think I think playing the game in Tiger Stadium gives it a lot of cachet too. And I guarantee you, the Southern fans would want to be in Tiger Stadium. Southern players would love the idea of playing in Tiger Stadium, even if it was for the other team. So yeah, it's a pipe dream there, Jim. You can keep pushing that if you want on the radio, but I don't think it's going to happen. There's just going to be too many people are going to want to be at that game.
But I think people would pay several $100s a ticket, maybe as much as $1,000 a ticket to see this. It will be a spectacle, and there's no doubt people spend several $100s to go see Hamilton at the Sanger in New Orleans. They would pay a lot to see LSU and Southern play. But the elephant in the room, Jim, you know as well as I do, we live in one of the most violent cities in America. People are concerned that there would be violence, and we've seen Wade Sims was killed in North Baton Rouge. The running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he killed a man in self-defense in North Baton Rouge. Are we going to have a potential for some not so pleasant things if this happens?
I don't think so. I mean, I think tensions, there might be some tension about that, but I think a lot of precautions would be taken, and that's why I'm saying you make a football festival weekend out of it, and you try to treat it as something that draws parts of Baton Rouge together instead of pulling them apart. And I think in this day we can do that. I think we know how to do that. And let me say, I've been out to Southern many times. I've never felt unsafe. I've never felt threatened. People can get shot in any part of Baton Rouge, okay? And I think there's a perception there that it's a little overhyped. So I would not worry about that part of it.
And it's not like there haven't been incidents with LSU playing Alabama or Alabama fans acting up when LSU is playing other opponents, as we saw very recently. Football, in its very nature, with the competitive zeal so high and the stakes so high, it elicits sometimes some bad things.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think the Southern people would mind that much coming over. They want to. In fact, Southern loses a lot of fans to LSU. I know I was talking to some of the people at Southern that said that Florida game, Southern played at home that night, and he said, I bet you we lose about 1,000 of our fans that want to go over there for the big time atmosphere that Tiger Stadium creates, and some of these people aren't going to the games. They just want to be out there and tailgating and with that big time college atmosphere. And ever since LSU became relevant nationally at the beginning of around 2000, it's been like that. Southern's fan base is kind of eroded.
So is it going to happen?
I think it's going to happen. I think it should. The way it might not happen is if the Division I schools or the FBS schools decide they have to start playing non-conference games, and all of a sudden these non-conference games get squeezed out, and that might end up having LSU being forced to punt.
Well, LSU has played other schools, as we know, that are of the same caliber as Southern, and Southern's played at Georgia. It's not unprecedented for this to happen. It's long overdue, and I know when it does, Jim Kleinpeter will be right there covering LSU and Southern as you have done for 40 years, as a few people have. You're one of the best in the business. Good to have you with us on Tiger Rag Television, Jim Kleinpeter.
Thank you, Jim.
And we'll return with more Tiger Rag Television after this brief pause.
Welcome back to Tiger Rag TV. I'm Jeff Palermo, along with Tiger Rag editor James Moran and assistant editor for Tiger Rag magazine, Tyler Nunez. It's time for the Tiger Rag six-pack. 6 questions dealing with LSU football or the Southeastern Conference or college football in general. Let's start off with question number 1. Joe Burrow set the single-season touchdown record at LSU with 29. James, can he get to 50 touchdown passes this season?
I can see why you think he wouldn't, because Auburn and Alabama are maybe the 2 toughest defenses he's going to face in the next few weeks. But with some soft opponents behind it, I think mathematically he should get to 50 without much question. I mean, if LSU, they got 5 more regular season games, they could potentially play a 6th with the SEC championship game and then at least 1 bowl game. If they make it to Atlanta or dare I say the playoffs, I think 50 and maybe even 55 would be in play.
Yeah, I think if they make the SEC championship game, it's a lock. These next couple weeks, it's really going to be up to the offensive line. Make sure that they don't get too much pressure on Joe Burrow. Make sure that he's a little bit comfortable, especially going up against a strong defensive line in Auburn. I think he should be able to get past that hurdle, and he should make it to 50 touchdowns.
Tell you one team I think he would love to light up, that's Texas A&M. I know Alabama and Auburn are big games, but I think he's still salty over the loss to Texas A&M last year in 7 overtimes. Question number 2 for the Tiger Rag six-pack. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 547 rushing yards through 7 games. Does he get to 1,000?
I never would have believed it at the beginning of this season, especially considering the 2 5-star freshmen they brought in, and John Emery and Tyrion Davis-Price, but I think he's actually going to do it. He's been their #1 back all season. I don't see him slowing down at all. He's had a phenomenal season, and I think he's going to continue that.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way on this one. I mean, I can see, I think he's running the ball well enough to get to 1,000 yards. I mean, the cuts he was making the other day were out of this world. I mean, he was kind of leaving guys with broken ankles. But the fact that John Emery and even more so Tyrion Davis-Price have been cutting into his carries of late, I think that's only can continue with, especially against some of the softer games LSU has left on the schedule. So I think not by his own fault, but just because of a lack of carries, he's going to come up a little short of 1,000 rushing yards. But when you factor in what he does as a receiver, I do think he'll be over 1,000 total yards with some ease there.
Especially with Ole Miss and Arkansas coming up on the schedule after the 2 big ones, you would think the freshman running backs are going to see a lot of carries in those 2 games. All right, question number 3. Jacoby Stevens and Grant Delpit have played a lot better here recently. What do you think the reason is behind their improved play?
I think it just took some time for LSU and for those guys to find a balance to who does what. I mean, coming into the season, the plan was to play a lot of 3 safety looks with Todd Harris doing a lot of the deep free safety stuff that LSU used to have John Battle do before he graduated. So after a few weeks after he went down with that knee injury against Texas, he's out for the season, of course. They kind of went through some growing pains. That and a lingering shoulder issue for Grant Delpit, I think, was really what kind of held them back a little bit. Now they seem to have found their groove. Grant Delpit's healthy. He's flying around making plays. Jacoby Stevens seems to have turned the corner a little bit in terms of his pass coverage, and those 2 guys are once again one of the strengths of this LSU defense.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that they're playing their style of football. They're both aggressive players who like to be ball hawks. For a few weeks, they were kind of back in coverage, playing some passive football by design, but now Dave Aranda has figured out how to best utilize them in this defense, and it's showing up in big waves.
All right, question number 4 for the Tiger Rag six-pack. Bigger upset in college football this season. Was it South Carolina beating Georgia in Athens? Or what about Illinois on their home turf knocking off the Wisconsin Badgers this past weekend?
This is a really tough one, but I'm going to go with Illinois knocking off Wisconsin because Wisconsin defensively had looked absolutely dominant, and Illinois just had nothing going for most of their season. But they go in, home crowd, they use it to their advantage. They go and get a big win against a team that looked borderline unstoppable up to that point.
Both were stunners. There's not much doubt about that. But I'm going to go with South Carolina over Georgia just because of the fact that that South Carolina team hadn't really shown you much. And the fact that they went into Athens and won, a place that's really tough to play, was kind of a shocker to me. I mean, Illinois hadn't shown you much either, but they were playing at home. It's always easier to pull an upset at home as opposed to on the road. So for my money, I would go with Georgia losing at home, especially coming off of the Notre Dame win with some of the big games they had left on their schedule, that to me was a bigger shock.
I think it's safe to say that Wisconsin was looking ahead to the next week's game against Ohio State and just fell asleep against Lovie Smith's Fighting Illini. All right, question number 5 for you guys as we continue with the Tiger Rag 6-pack. If LSU gets a win against Auburn on Saturday, that would be 3 victories against top 10 teams. Do you think the AP voters, and maybe even the coaches that are voting in the coaches' top 25, do you think that will be enough to get LSU above Alabama in those top 25 polls?
It depends on style points, I think. If LSU struggles, and look, I expect them to struggle to some degree with Auburn. Auburn's a really good football team with 2 really good lines on the offensive and defensive side, but if LSU were to go out there and post a 10-point victory maybe, I definitely think it's possible, especially when you look at Alabama playing Arkansas without Tua Tagovailoa. If they struggle a little bit with Mac Jones, or the offense looks sluggish, or the defense kind of looks like they're looking ahead to the bye week, I definitely think LSU could conceivably jump Alabama for the number 1 spot and then set up a 1 versus 2 the other way going into that game in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, if you look at this week's poll compared to last week, they actually gained ground on Alabama this year. They got more first-place votes than they did last week. I think that trend will continue, especially with another top 10 win. I see LSU making that jump, if only to cause a little drama with a 2-week wait between that big match that everyone's been looking for all season. I think LSU-Alabama is already going to be a marquee matchup. If you see the rankings switch from 1 to 2 between those 2 teams, I think it's going to add a little bit of drama and spice to that game that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Yeah, and then we also have to monitor what happens between Wisconsin and Ohio State. I mean, if Ohio State looks really good against the Badgers, then maybe Ohio State makes a claim to being the number 1 ranked team. But it's hard to argue a team beating 3 top 10 teams not being ranked number 1. All right, final question for you guys. It was announced this week that the LSU-Alabama game will, in fact, kick off at 2:30. It's first time it's an afternoon kickoff between these SEC rivals since 2010. That was the legendary game where Les Miles ate grass. So what does Ed Orgeron need to do in order to get a win against Alabama in a couple weeks? Does he got to do something crazy?
He hasn't taken many cues from Les Miles. I don't see him taking many more right here. I think he's going to play his own game. I think he's going to block out the noise. Last year, going into the Alabama game, I think he got a little too psyched up. He was a little too amped. You could see it in the Tiger Walk walking down. He was engaging with the crowd in a way that he normally didn't. I think he learned his lesson. He's going to go in there with a level, calm head, and he's going to try to lead the Tigers to their first win against Alabama since 2011.
No, I think Ed Orgeron just has to do what Les Miles failed to do in all of the other subsequent Alabama games, which is just let his team do what they do. I mean, Joe Burrow and this receiving core and the things they've done in the passing game are the reason LSU is undefeated and number 2 in the country. You can't kind of get hesitant about letting them turning those guys loose in Tuscaloosa. You got to let them throw it. You got to let them do what they do. Now, I would say maybe there's some 4th down gambles that LSU is going to have to take if they want to win that game. It's hard to beat Alabama with field goals, especially when your kicker is struggling a little bit, which LSU kicker Cade York is at the moment. Ed Orgeron said when we spoke to him this week that he's not considering a kicker change, even though York's missed 4 kicks in his last 3 games. But he would just consider going for it more and putting the game in Joe Burrow's hands. For my money, that's not a bad decision.
Of course, a big game this Saturday before they get to Alabama. That's the Tigers and the Auburn Tigers at 2:30 inside Tiger Stadium. That does it for the Tiger Rag 6-pack. We'll take a break. More Tiger Rag TV when we come back.
I'm Jim Inkster, and we're glad you're with us for Tiger Rag Television. And our interview segment this week is with Dan Bornay, the voice of the Valley. 34 years he's been calling the games at Tiger Stadium. When you go by Death Valley Saturday night, you hear his voice. If you're in the stadium, you hear it. And for 32 years, he's also been the voice of the Pete Maravich Assembly Center. Dan Bornay's voice may be the best known in Louisiana. The old days, it was the play-by-play guy, but now with all the games on television, the voice of Dan Bornay is resonant with LSU football and basketball, and it's good to have you with us, Dan.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here, and good luck with the new television program.
Well, thank you.
I'm excited about it.
2:30 Saturday. You will be in the stadium. You like these afternoon games?
Not, I could do without them, actually. I love it at night. The games at night just have this special aura about them that I learned to love growing up in the stadium in the 50s and going to the games when the kickoffs were at 8 o'clock, and the lighting wasn't quite
Yeah,
as good.
people forget that. 8 o'clock
8
was,
o'clock, right.
yeah, 8 o'clock.
And it was a real fashion show back then. Ladies dressed to kill, men in coats and ties, and their dress hats, you know.
I know.
It was really
Wouldn't it be nice to
spectacular.
bring that back?
It would be interesting to have a throwback game where the fans come in throwback uniforms. That would be marvelous.
And some of the sayings that you have are now part of the lexicon. Chance of rain?
Never. Yeah, that sort of that happened accidentally.
When did it happen?
Well, it happened sometime, I guess, during the 90s. Having come to these games with my aunt back in the 50s, she would always say it never rains in Tiger Stadium. And somehow that stuck with me. And I used to give the weathercast pretty well straight up. It's 85 degrees, relative humidity is 90%, winds from the south at 5 miles an hour, chance of rain 20%. And one night I just said chance of rain, and never came out. And it wasn't designed to be iconic phrase. It just was a throwaway. But now everybody expects it. So they've got T-shirts now. Chance of rain, never. So it's kind of fun.
And a few years ago, you penned a poem about Death Valley.
Well, I did. A little poem called Saturday Night in Death Valley. And LSU's been very kind. They play it now right before the kickoff and set it to film and to music. And so it plays in the stadium just prior to kickoff.
And it was copied, plagiarized in a not so impressive way.
Well, it was plagiarized by a school in North Carolina. We won't mention the school. But it was plagiarized, and it was
State University, I believe, but keep going.
It was used for basketball to begin with. And it had the sun setting in the eastern sky. Of course, sun doesn't set in the eastern sky. And so
it did in the Green Beret with John Wayne, though.
Well, of course, big John Wayne. What can you expect?
But Dan Bornay, you've been around a long time, and you've been a fixture in this community in various ways. Dan, for many years, was head of the Louisiana Chemical Association, and he, of course, is now a deacon. And in that capacity, you have worked with one Nick Lou Saban in a most unusual way. You went to the same church with him, and when he came back to Baton Rouge as coach of Alabama, he goes to Mass, I think, almost every day. You wanted to help him out.
Well, every game day, 6 or 7 hours before the game, Coach Saban has a Mass for his team and for his official party. And that's whether he was at LSU or at Alabama. So in 2010, when he came back to play here, coaching Alabama, the Mass was at the hotel, and one of our local priests celebrated Mass. And
Father Burns, right?
Actually, it was Father Tonbu.
Okay.
But Father Burns used to do many of the Masses. And interestingly enough, LSU won that night. We beat Alabama in 2010. So fast forward to 2012, and LSU's entertaining Alabama again. So I know that the team's coming back. I know that Coach Saban's going to have a Mass. So I sent his wife Terry a note and said I'd be happy to help and set up everything if they wanted it. And so I got a call at about 10 o'clock the Monday before the game, and it was a graduate assistant who called and said, Dan, Coach Saban said thanks, but no thanks. This year he's bringing his own priest. And so, and he has ever since.
And he switched hotels.
And he's
kept, I presume, the same priest in the same hotel.
Well, the priest is an Alabama priest. He's the chaplain there at the Alabama Catholic Student Center. So he travels with the team now. Well,
there are many fewer Catholics in Alabama than there are in Louisiana, but Nick Saban, he's a devout man, and more power to him, and it seems to be working rather well for him.
Well, he's also endowed that whole Catholic Student Center on the campus.
Has he?
Yes, indeed.
Right. Well, good for him. Yeah. And he was a big part in building the academic center at LSU.
Well, when he was hired, he wanted two things. He wanted a football operations building, and he wanted a student center for academics, and he got both. Now, both of those things have just been expanded and are tremendous recruiting tools for the kids, but also for the parents of the kids who come in and want to see where their kids are going to study and where their kids are going to be coached for athletics. So those two things together are legacies of Coach Saban that we should be thankful for.
Well, he is truly the elephant, literally, in the room. And on November 9th, Nick Saban will be hosting his former employer and there'll be 100,000 or so of his closest friends there. And we'll have Nick Saban going toe-to-toe with Ed Orgeron.
That's right.
And this one could be one for the ages. It could be bigger than the game of the century in 2011. It shapes up as a game of just monumental proportion.
Well, someone said, game of the century, then why are you going to play it again? You know, if it was the game of the century, then how many do you have? Of course, we got another little game between now and then that I prefer to focus on, and play Auburn. And so that's going to be a tremendous game because all those games are close. If you look back the last 5 or 6 times we've played Auburn, they've all been very, very close games. One of them a walk-off field goal where we won the game. And so Auburn always plays us tough. We always play them tough. They're a great team. We're a great team. CBS has got it. The second of 3 consecutive CBS television broadcasts for LSU football, which is tremendous for the program.
But at 2:30.
At 2:30.
And it's a bit of a disappointment. The Alabama game's going to be an afternoon game, but it is. But LSU and Alabama will play, and presumably they'll both be undefeated. You're right, there's a tough game with Auburn. Auburn, which has a great program, has won a national title in 2010. They haven't won here since 1999.
They know that too, and I'm sure that that's something on there.
Wasn't that when Tommy Tuberville lit up the cigar? And
that might have been the game after that. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's brought a little ill will with it, but that's okay. I mean, most people have forgotten that now, and it's just 2 great programs, all hitting on 8 cylinders, playing each other in Tiger Stadium. It's going to be great.
Well, you were around when other quarterbacks led LSU to a national title, and they were 50-year seniors, and Matt Mock in 2003 and Matt Flynn in 2007. And now we have Joe Burrow, and his statistics are truly off the chart. You know, we speak in superlatives in sports, but 29 touchdowns in 7 games, he's already set a school record.
Well, I was around for the first national championship with a quarterback named Warren Rabb, too, as a matter of fact.
Well, you were a very young lad.
I wasn't calling games back then. I was in 6th grade, and I remember it like yesterday. It's a system, it's the coaching, it's the team, and it's the athlete. I think if you look at it, in that perspective, you see what a great system, great coaching, great teammates, and what a really outstanding athlete can do. And Joe Burrow clearly is very special, and with great receivers and great play calling. It's a tremendous team effort, and it's a lot of fun to watch. In fact, it's almost as if the defense is saying, "Joe, slow it down a little bit."
Yeah, he's an amazing
a touchdown
guy.
every 3 minutes or less. In some cases.
Yeah.
What's fun is that that every time LSU gets the ball, there's a firecracker going to go off somewhere. Yeah. There's going to be an exciting play somewhere that's going to happen. And it's a delight to watch.
It's an amazing scenario. And LSU, of course, was criticized for not having an imaginative offense for many moons, and now they're doing things nobody else in the country is. But Alabama, as we know, has a pretty good quarterback. The one at Oklahoma is a good one. Do you think Burrow has a shot at the Heisman, a good shot?
I think so. I think he's a legitimate Heisman candidate. I think the Tua still is certainly legitimate, even with the bad leg. Jalen Hurts, I mean, my goodness, look what he's done over there at Oklahoma.
And the running, in addition to the passing,
And he's sort of to me, he's sort of a favorite of some kind because of the way he took the demotion at Alabama, took it like a man, went on, and now is doing great things for Oklahoma. But Joe Burrow clearly can really light it up, and so much fun to watch.
Well, Dan Bournet began his odyssey at Tiger Stadium in 1986, and they had a pretty good quarterback in your first game, and that was the first game for one Tommy Hudson, wasn't it?
Yeah. I marked my LSU football tenure with Tommy Hudson and my LSU basketball tenure with Chris Jackson. So the first years of calling football and basketball were pretty good years.
Pretty good.
And the ones after were pretty good years, too. Yeah. Tommy Hudson, the Tommy gun, just a tremendous quarterback with a receiver, out of this world receiver named Wendell Davis. Just fantastic receiver, tremendous receiver. And Eddie Fuller, I mean, the earthquake game, those types of things are memorable. And they go down in Tiger lore. But every time I see a great LSU receiver pull a ball in, or win a jump ball in the end zone.
Yeah.
I think of Wendell Davis just getting open, and Hodson just threading the needle to him, hitting him on the nose.
There you go. We're going to take a break here in a moment, Dan, but if you can give us the Cliff Notes version, how did you get the gig?
Well, I asked for it. No one else had asked when Sid Crocker retired in 1985. And Sid and I had worked at Channel 9 many years earlier. And Sid brought me up to the booth when I covered my first game in 1968, a Texas A&M game. And Sid said, "Come look at my booth. You might be doing this one day." And I never dreamed. When Sid retired, I asked him who was going to take his place. He said he didn't know. I wrote Bob Broadhead a letter. And several months later, I got a call saying, "Come in and visit, and you can be the PA guy because no one else asked." And that's a true story.
It all began in 1986, and Dan Bornay still reverberates through the valley. He is, as he will this Saturday, as LSU hosts Auburn. And we'll talk to this fine gentleman in another segment with this fine gentleman after this brief pause on Tiger Rag Television. I'm Jim Inkster, and our guest for another segment is the incomparable Dan Bornay, who is a man synonymous with Louisiana, and no doubt he loves his state and he loves LSU, and his voice is in the Valley every Saturday night, and in some cases Saturday afternoon, as it will be this week. As you heard, Dan, he began his career many years ago at Channel 9 WAFB. And perhaps that experience has led him down paths that other broadcasters would never go. And Dan Bornay, for those unaware, is also the star of the big screen. He still gets royalties for Everybody's All-American.
I do. I get $4 a year from Everybody's All-American. And I like to say that John Goodman was my co-star. And of course, he was in town a couple of weeks ago as the guest picker, for game day. But John Goodman, Dennis Quaid, Jessica Lange, Timothy Hutton, Carl Lumley, they were all down to shoot that movie in '88 and '89. And they did a lot of stadium scenes, and the football action was live action at halftime. And that was filmed, and the idea was to get the crowd, into it, so we got them into it. And so, sort of in return for that, I got to MC the championship banquet.
At Boudreaux's.
At Boudreaux's, and we filmed there for 4 days, actually, and shot that scene of that banquet when the 25-year reunion of the championship team is celebrated. And it was a lot of fun. And by the way, Mike Papajohn got his start there. Mike Papajohn, baseball player under Skip Bertman. He was an extra, played on the football team for the movie. And Taylor Hatford, who was the producer, saw him and said, "Boy, Mike, you're terrific. Why don't you come with me to Hollywood and be an actor?" And Papajohn says, "Why not?" And he's
out pretty well,
now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been in blockbusters. And so that was his start. And so it was my start, but it was also my end, because that's where my movie career began and ended.
Frank DeFord's the one who wrote the book,
He did.
Everybody's All-American.
He wrote the book, and the book, people say it's about true justice, and then transformed into the canon image here, of course, the LSU, the number 20. But Taylor tried to film that movie in South Carolina. It didn't work out. Tried to film it at Oxford. Didn't work out. Came to Baton Rouge and said, "Well, let's just make it a LSU type movie," and sure enough it was.
It's somewhat sacrilegious to see another player wear number 20 for LSU, but Billy Cannon, of course, his number is retired, and in his case it really is retired. Tommy Casanova's his jersey's retired, but a lot of players wear 37. Joe May has noted that he wore 20 before Billy Cannon, so he says his number's retired as well. But now,
by the way, 60th anniversary this year of Billy Cannon's.
I know, in a few days.
89-yard run.
I know.
Halloween night, 1959.
You were there, weren't you?
I was not there. No.
Well,
175,000 other people were. But I heard it on my dad's car radio.
J.C. Politz was doing the game.
J.C. Politz did it. And it was a terrific run and all. But the thing that had us biting our nails was there in the fourth quarter with Ole Miss driving.
Yeah.
And 4th and goal from the 1-yard line, and Cannon and Rabb stopped Doug Elmore, and they win the game. That won the game. That put the icing on the cake. That defensive stand in the south end zone was tremendous.
And in those days, players played on both sides of the ball, and so you didn't have these 350-pound linemen. You couldn't be that big and get around in those days. Now we have an age of specialization, and we have players on the same team, sometimes star players with the same number, Dan Bornay. That must be...
some players with three of them have the same number. And
yeah, isn't that something?
It's bizarre. Thank goodness we have the, we have the names on the back of the jerseys at least. Some teams only have the school's name on the back of the jersey, and they have two guys with the same number. So you have to figure, well, is this guy playing offense or is he playing defense? Well, if he's on a special team, you don't know. He could be a cornerback or he could be a wide receiver.
Right.
And he's on a special team and he makes a tackle and you're clueless.
I remember back in 2007 when this phenomenon first started, Vern Lundquist had Ryan Perilou playing defense. It was Kelvin Shepard, but they looked reasonably the same. He thought Perilou was playing defense, but now you have to adjust to that. Right. But the name still can be challenging in South Louisiana, and you, having grown up on the bayou, you know how to do it.
Well, names like Rodrigue and Ogeron and Boudreaux and Gautreaux and False and Politz, they kind of come natural.
Yeah.
Those are easy.
Well, and you have corrected me on the correct pronunciation of Coach O. It's
Ogeron.
Ogeron.
That's how we say it.
So the R is actually silent.
It's almost like, to me, it's almost like an O apostrophe, but he's not Irish.
And what an amazing story he is at 58 years old. You talk about a guy who's been knocked around and has come back, and now he's on the precipice of some real greatness. It's an amazing story.
Well, it's a tremendous American success story. It can apply to a lot of different enterprises, a lot of different endeavors, and this happens to apply to coaching. But it shows what character and hard work and the belief in a system and the ability to give credit to others for success, what that will do for you, and it's done it for Coach O.
I recall when I was a student at LSU, Coach Mack was fired at 56, and they said the game's passed him by.
Yeah.
And then Paul Dietzel, when Bo Ryan's plane crashed, he was 55, and Paul Manasseh was trying to get Dietzel to name himself head coach, which probably would have been the best thing in retrospect. But Dietzel said it's a young man's game. Now we've got coaches. Saban will be 68 on Halloween.
Yeah.
Coach O's 58. There are a lot of coaches coaching well into their 50s and 60s, and we saw Joe Paterno win a long time well into his 80s, as did Eddie Robinson. That's a good thing, I think.
Well, as one said, old age and treachery often overcome youth and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Those old guys,
Well,
they look. They've got they're up in age. I understand that, but they've got a bunch of young fellas coaching with them too, and that it's good chemistry. Obviously, it's certainly good with Coach Saban's staff. It's certainly good with Coach Ogeron's staff, and other great coaches that have good, solid teams of coaches behind them.
Well, Saban lost 8 assistants last year. He must be hard to work for, huh? That's what they say.
Well, what do they go on and do? I mean, he's got probably 6 or 8 assistants who are now head coaches that he's played against.
That he's never lost to.
He was undefeated against his. But he had a great answer for that at media days. He said, every one of those guys picked up a program that needed rebuilding. And so it's not unusual that an established program would have success against a program that's up and coming. I thought that was a very generous way of saying, yeah, but wait, they're going to get better, and they'll be challenging me down the road. So.
Well, he's been very gracious in his comments about LSU, and in the 21st century, people may not realize it, but LSU has beaten Alabama 9 times, and Alabama's won 11 times. But Saban's record is 14-4 in the same series. So sometimes the coach does matter, and he's done a great job at both LSU, where he was 4-1 against Alabama, and at Alabama, where he's 10-3 against LSU. Nick Saban's a cut above, but this year, it looks like that game could be quite competitive, and Burrow may not be stopped.
Well, let's just see what happens Saturday at 2:30 before we start counting those chickens.
That's true. Be the 3rd top 10 team that LSU has played, and Auburn is no slouch.
No, indeed.
And
look, the Southeastern, 5 of the top 10 teams in the country are Southeastern Conference teams. There's the SEC, and then there's the rest. And anytime you play one of the top 5, you're going to be challenged. It's going to be A barn burner.
There you go.
Quote, Joe Dean.
Joe Dean.
A barn burner.
Dan Bournet, thank you. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Jim. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Pleasure.
You bet.
And we'll be back with more Tiger Rag Television after this brief pause.
Welcome back to Tiger Rag TV. Jeff Palermo, News and Sports Director of the Louisiana Radio Network. It's prediction time with Tiger Rag editor James Moran and assistant editor Tyler Nunez as we take a look at this week's games. Let's first go outside of the Southeastern Conference. Number 3, Ohio State against 13th ranked Wisconsin. The Buckeyes are a 2-touchdown favorite. James?
Yeah, this game lost a little bit of its luster with Wisconsin getting upset by Illinois last week in a stunner. This would have been an unquestioned kind of game of the season kind of game. Still a good game, though. I would take Ohio State and lay the points. I feel like I saw a lot of things I didn't like with that Wisconsin team last week, and Ohio State's been so dominant on both sides of the ball. I'm going to lay the points and take the Buckeyes.
Last week, I was really high on Wisconsin. This week, I can't do it. I got to give Ohio State the points here. If Illinois was able to show those kind of weaknesses in Wisconsin's defense, Ohio State definitely will be able to with Justin Fields at the helm. I got to give Ohio State the points.
Our next game, again, a non-SEC contest. Number 8, Notre Dame on the road in Ann Arbor against Michigan. And the Fighting Irish, they are underdogs in this one by 1.5 points.
I got to go with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in this one. Michigan has not impressed me at all at this point this season. Notre Dame showed some life against Georgia. They've had some struggles as well, but I think overall, they're more complete. They're a better team. I'm going with Notre Dame.
I hate to agree with Tyler because it doesn't make for great television, but I'm also going to take Notre Dame. This line feels way out of whack to me. I mean, I thought you were going to tell me Notre Dame was at least a field goal favorite, even on the road. We've seen nothing from this Michigan team. Shea Patterson has really kind of regressed, honestly, since his days at Ole Miss as a freshman. I'm going to take Notre Dame to win straight up on the road. If you're giving me 1.5 points, I guess I'll take it, but that line doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Notre Dame seems like the better team, even on the road.
Back in the Southeastern Conference now in College Station as Texas A&M is a 10-point favorite over Mississippi State. Did you see enough life from the Bulldogs, James, that they could possibly give the Aggies a little bit of a competition on Saturday?
I think Mississippi State hangs in there and makes this a ball game. I mean, Garrett Schrader, their quarterback, he doesn't have the best arm, but he's kind of feisty, kind of frisky as an underdog, I think. I like him getting the points, and Mississippi State should be a little bit healthier, a little bit suspension-riddled on defense than the group we saw play LSU last week. I'm going to take the points there.
I'm going to go the opposite direction. I think Texas A&M is a far superior team. I think the wheels are kind of coming off in Starkville. Mississippi State has really struggled this season, especially with their last 2 losses against Tennessee of all teams, and then last week against LSU. They showed a little bit of fight, but I think Texas A&M is going to come in and beat them pretty handily.
All right, let's go to our last game, and that is LSU and Auburn. The Fighting Tigers are a 12.5-point favorite. Some thought last week that maybe LSU wasn't favored enough over Mississippi State, and the Tigers barely covered. Are they able to cover this week, Tyler?
Yeah, I think that line's a little too high for me, at least from a comfort zone standpoint. I'm going to take Auburn on the points here. I still think LSU wins this game, but Auburn's defense is so good. That defensive line is going to get a pass rush on Joe Burrow. It's going to make things a little bit tough for him. I'm taking Auburn with the points here.
Yeah, at least you didn't say you're going to take the Tigers, because that would have gotten a little bit confusing. But I'm going to go the opposite way here. I'm going to take Auburn. I'm going to take the points just because in this series, and I know that doesn't mean a ton. I know 16 of the last 19 games have been won by the home team, but the last 2 years, these games have really come down to the wire, whether it was LSU's rally in Tiger Stadium 2 years ago or last year, obviously, the walk-off Cole Tracy field goal. I just think Auburn is so good in the trenches. They're going to be able to stay in this game. I think the difference in this game ultimately is obviously Joe Burrow against a true freshman quarterback in Bo Nix, but I do think Auburn can run the ball well enough to stay in this game for all 4 quarters. I think this game goes down to a touchdown or less.
Hard to believe. 1999, the last time Auburn went into Death Valley and got a win over the LSU Tigers. We'll take a break. More of Tiger Rag TV coming up after this.
Thank you for joining us here on Tiger Rag Television. We'll be here same time, same place before and after Coach O's show. Coming up this weekend, we've been talking about it all show. Auburn, head-to-head, in Death Valley, but coming up on the schedule is the big one. Alabama is coming, and hopefully we'll be ready. But faith in Joe Burrow holds pretty strong amongst the Tigers and Baton Rouge, so we'll see next time here at Tiger Rag Television. Be sure to follow us, and we'll see you again next time.